Yo! Statistics based on polls and inventories are the best way of knowing how society thinks and behaves, which helps us know how to tackle current problems. Polls and statistics are great. However, polls and statistics have been manipulated and misunderstood to the degree of being harmful and misleading. The saying, beware of statistics, holds much truth. Notorious statistics reside in Alfred Kinsey's books Sexual Behavior in the Human Male and Female, 1948 and 1953. But their polls only came from volunteers who were probed face to face or were even expected to make an explicit film in a conservative era when sex was extremely private. Therefore, extraordinarily high percentages of adults were said to have engaged in taboo practices. The circumstances through which Kinsey got his data invalidate his studies, since they rarely included average conventional people. I made my own poll on LiveLeak. I needed numerous duplicates of this poll under various videos because the insignificant number of responses from only one would make the result meaningless. I also put the poll under videos about other subjects that had absolutely nothing to do with the poll question. I had to do it that way, otherwise my results would be invalid. I'll explain. Let's say there's a video about skiing. It rarely ever comes up in a search by someone who's not searching for skiing videos. And logically, there'd be a far higher percentage of those who've gone skiing amongst those searching for skiing videos. And let's say that underneath the skiing video, there's a poll asking the viewer if they've ever gone skiing. That poll would be worthless because the demographic would be so particularly funneled by the search engine. Whenever people see a poll and know its subject beforehand, say it's about elephant riding, those without such experience avoid the poll, and so its results may say that 75% of people have ridden an elephant, which we know is completely false, unless all of them live in India. The only way such polls could be valid is if everyone around was provoked into taking them, for example, voting in elections. Even censuses do not blare beforehand what they'll ask and feature numerous questions, not just one. Since most of us do not have the luxury of being professional census takers, we must be extra careful not to invalidate our poll. Though amateur polls may be somewhat inaccurate due to their small number of responders, with no other factors which distort or invalidate the poll, they are far better than nothing. The only way they'd be bested is if a poll asking the same question had a far higher number of responders and also had no other factors which distorted or invalidated the poll. And as I've briefly mentioned before, another way to distort poll results is using loaded language. For example, only those who support abortion in most or all circumstances use the term pro-choice. Only those who oppose abortion in most or all circumstances use the term pro-life. During a surprise survey over the wire, I was simply quizzed as to the circumstances wherein I did or did not approve of abortion, which determined exactly where I stood. Widespread surveys incorporating both landlines and cell phones would be highly accurate, apparently the only real inaccuracy being the exclusion of Amish or homeless people who lack telephones. Perhaps highly intelligent people who use faulty polls and statistics are being purposely dishonest. Another example of poor poll taking are the conclusions about sociopathy based on interviews conducted by psychiatrist Robert Hare of persons who were likely sociopaths due to their extensive history of brutal crime. He undoubtedly came to some correct conclusions, such as that sociopaths are pathological liars and don't feel guilt. However, since all his interviews were predominantly on male prisoners, his studies falsely suggest that sociopaths are predominantly male. And since his interviews were optional, his studies falsely suggest that sociopaths are predominantly outgoing, since standoffish persons would generally avoid interviews. Some who quote statistics only quote numbers, which by itself is meaningless. For example, noting that there are more car accidents and fatalities than motorcycle mishaps. But percentages reveal that motorcyclists are over 20 times more likely to have a serious accident or die in a crash. Others may not know what percentages are truly high or low. For example, a boss feels that employees are purposely calling in sick on Friday mornings to get 3-day weekends. He then complains, people call in sick on Friday 20% of the time. But with 5-day work weeks, that actually shows that employees are not abusing their sick days. Some people have both the statistics and their percentages, such as knowing that certain areas with high percentages of Christian believers have higher crime rates than certain areas with low percentages of Christian believers. But to conclude that Christianity causes crime would be to completely misconstrue the data. We must verify that there is a correlation between one specific characteristic and its percentage results with corroborating information, or seek another factor to explain our poll results and thereby revise the poll accordingly, or make a much different poll based on an inventory of different characteristics. Before I conclude here, here's a recap and summary of what to avoid. 1. Don't judge things based only on your personal experiences or only anecdotal experiences on up to a handful of people. This information is nearly worthless. Rather, we must evaluate the and experiences on over 100 people. The more people, the more accurate. The less people, the less accurate it's going to be. And generally, statistics based on several thousand individuals, like I said, are more accurate than those based on a couple hundred. Statistics based on over 1 million are more accurate than several thousand and so forth. Numbers, of course, increase accuracy, all else being equal. 2, data on the number of occurrences of something must include the percentage of times it occurs, and we must know if a certain percentage is truly high, low, or average based on additional information. 3, don't turn your poll into an either-or fallacy. If there are more than 2 legitimate responses to a question, provide an additional option or options, and avoid such polls that use the either-or fallacy. 4, polls must be anonymous. Poll takers mustn't know how others voted beforehand because of influence. And pollsters must avoid loaded language, like I mentioned before, so that poll takers are not dissuaded from being truthful. 5, unless you only want statistics on one people group, make sure that every people group is fairly represented in the survey. Like, for instance, everybody from India, you'd have the elephant riders be so many. Worldwide, it'd be obviously different. 6, all polls which people discover using search engines and those whose subject people know before deciding to take them are very inaccurate due to naturally excluding those who don't fit the expected poll response. 7, we must understand cause and effect and not make a false correlation between various aspects of our data. Minus the aforementioned barriers to proper conclusions, all statistics based on large-scale polls, such as those linking lung cancer to smoking and crime percentages by race and gender, are infallibly correct. So, poll on!